Hi everyone, I hope you are doing well. In the short video today, I will walk you through 5 fundamental issues which buyers must factor in while doing M&A transactions. These are 5 areas which often buyers undermine or overlook and thereby exposing them to an unfavorable M&A transaction or even worse, an aborted M&A deal. So please stay tuned for these 5 critical issues. As the famous saying goes, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And therefore, no wonder the first point, which is absolutely vital, is planning and preparation. The buyers must give due weightage to sit down and chalk out a strategy right from step 0 to the final step for consummation of the transaction. Make sure they have evaluated the transaction holistically, not only from a commercial and business perspective, but from legal standpoint and all relevant perspectives. And then only take a final decision to transform the handshake deal into a binding M&A transaction. For example, if you haven't seen an M&A transaction, how it will play out from an integration standpoint, then it's not really quite wise to straight away throw yourself into the transaction and midway realize it's not really an ideal fit. It's very important that you strategize, plan, and prepare. Confidentiality is absolutely critical not only for the seller but buyer as well. For example, if a buyer lets the transaction details be leaked to the public at large, it's really inviting other potential buyers to take interest in the transaction, giving sellers more option and possibly losing out on a deal where it has invested substantial time. Also, in transactions where the buyer is itself sharing confidential information, for example, in a share swap deal where the seller will also like diligence on the buyer, it's vital that buyer also protects its confidential information. Connected to this is exclusivity. M&A deal really impinges on a lot of time on buyer's management, a lot of cost for doing diligence and crafting the transaction documents. The last thing you want is the seller really shopping around with the offer which buyer makes and really walking away with another buyer. Therefore, you have an exclusive period which is sufficient enough to allow you to do your diligence and negotiations and really lock up the seller for that exclusivity period. The next critical component in a M&A deal is term sheets. The buyer must avoid detailing a term sheet, otherwise you will get bogged down at a very early stage. Please keep the detailing for a later stage of definitive agreements. Once you have more information about the target, you have sorted out your structuring and done your diligence, etc. I recall many instances where buyer, in trying to do too much detailing at term sheet stage, lost the deal itself and the seller walked away with a buyer who was kind of more deal friendly. The second component is that please keep the term sheet non-binding and high level. The only binding provisions ordinarily are your confidentiality, exclusivity, and governing law. And if the buyer has negotiated a break fee provision where it can get some liquidated damages should the seller abort the transaction, breaching this exclusivity, it can claim some LDs. But barring that, the term sheet should be non-binding. The next critical aspect is structuring. That's really the bedrock of any transaction, isn't it? Many times we have seen parties do a term sheet and froze the structure already at a very high level, not realizing that the structuring is really something which depends on diligence, commercial understanding, and other nuances before you commit to really a structure. I remember one instance where parties agreed to share purchase transaction, which made no sense after diligence because the company had lots of liabilities and asset deal made far more sense. Likewise, parties in one transaction agreed to a holdback structure in excess of what the foreign exchange laws permit. And now that again was something which they agreed to only to realize later on is not allowed. Created a bit of complications and therefore it's always advisable that you sort out the structuring as early as possible in the M&A process. Due diligence is absolutely vital for M&A transaction. No matter how extensive your reps and warranties and indemnities are as a buyer, that is not a substitute for a proper thorough due diligence. Therefore, first things first, never ever compromise on the thorough due diligence regardless of the size of the transaction. Do a thorough diligence on the target and therefore seek adequate time when you negotiate your exclusivity period to factor in this particular leg, which is diligence. The second connected point which is very important is once you get the findings, Make sure all the red flag items are properly used to negotiate the purchase price related provisions. If there's adjustment, use that to negotiate that clause, and customize and tailor your reps and warranties and indemnities package so that you're well protected. And really, if there's a material issue which is kind of not resolvable by purely contractual protection, you can also walk out from the transaction. Absent a proper diligence, unfortunately, you will be just be relying on contractual protections, which after closing may be too little, too late. Right then, so these are the 5 most critical aspects for a buyer to keep in mind while doing an M&A deal, namely planning and preparation, then confidentiality and exclusivity, then comes the term sheet, structuring, and due diligence. Pay due attention to all 5 and you'll be more or less on your way to doing a successful M&A deal. Thank you very much for watching this. I really sincerely hope you found this useful.